Hello and welcome back to Shudeepa tutorial. Today we are going to discuss grade 10 chapter 2 CBSE science. The topic is acid, bases and salts. In this module 1 we are going to discuss acids and bases. It will be a small recap, how we identify substances as acids and bases, that is indicators and litmus test, the reaction of acids and bases with metals, metal carbonates, hydrocarbonates, and oxides. We are also going to discuss about the reaction of acids and bases with water and the formation of salt. But before we start, let's recap on an interesting problem. If someone is suffering from the problem of acidity after overeating, which of the following would you suggest as remedy? They are lemon juice, vinegar, and baking soda solution. So if you see the chemical constitution of lemon juice, it is citric acid. That means it is acidic in nature. Vinegar, it is acetic acid. And baking soda solution, it is sodium hydrogen carbonate or sodium bicarbonate. That is a base. So of the three choices that have been given to you, baking soda solution, that is a base, is the best option for the person because the person is already suffering from an acidity. How is baking soda solution going to find a remedy to that? I hope you remember neutralization reaction, and all these things we are discussing because you have studied them in details in your previous classes. It is just a recap. Neutralization reaction is a reaction in which an acid reacts with a base to form salt and water. So it is expected that if the person takes baking soda solution, the acidity may reduce. And bases are mainly the constituents of the antacid tablets or the liquids that we generally take when we have the problem of acidity. Now coming to the next part which you have already studied, water acids. I hope you remember the properties of the acids. Acids have sour taste. They turn blue litmus red. They have a pH value of less than 7. They are extremely corrosive to the skin as well as fabrics. Acids are extremely good electrolytes. Now, if you can recollect the properties of the bases are bitter in taste. They can change the color of litmus paper from red to blue. They react with the acids to form salt and water. They can conduct electricity up to an extent and are slippery or soapy to touch. Now that we have mentioned that acids turn blue litmus red, on the contrary, the bases turn the red litmus blue, what is this litmus? This litmus is a solution which is a purple colored dye and it is extracted from a plant which is a lichen. This lichen is actually an indicator which allows us to understand whether a substance is acidic, basic or neutral. Lichens belong to the thallophytes and are actually an association of algae and fungus. Also, there are other indicators that are natural indicators which you can create at home or in the laboratory very easily. Here are some of the names like the turmeric solution, the beetroot juice, the red cabbage juice, and the China rose solution. They have specific color, but when they come in contact with the acid or the bases, you can see here the list is provided to you, they will have a color change. So if in front of you, you have these indicators, which can be a litmus solution or any one of the ones which I have mentioned just now, you can identify the chemical nature of a reagent. Now coming to the next, we have a question here, which is very interesting. You have been provided with 3 test tubes. You can see here in the image, these 3 test tubes have 3 solutions, 1, 2 and 3. One of them contains distilled water, the other 2 contain acidic and a basic solution respectively. If you have been given one litmus paper, how will you identify the contents of each test tube? Now you can observe this litmus test. So we will be doing only the litmus red and blue. So in solution 1, when you dip the blue litmus, you can see there is a evident color change. The blue litmus has turned red, while the red litmus paper does not change its color. For solution 2, you can see the blue litmus, it did not change its color, while the red litmus has turned blue. In case of solution 3, the blue litmus remains blue, the red litmus remains red. Just now we have studied about the color change that can happen in the litmus paper based on what kind of solution that is. If a blue litmus becomes red, then it is acidic. That means solution 1 is acidic. If, on the contrary, the blue litmus remains blue while the red litmus becomes blue, it is a base. And if there is no color change, that means it is a neutral solution. Here in this case, according to the question, it must be the distilled water. So this is a very simple but interesting test that you will require to perform during your chemistry experiments. Now moving ahead, this is activity 2.1. You have been given samples of substances you can see here on the left hand column like hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, acetic acid, sodium hydroxide, calcium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, magnesium hydroxide and ammonium hydroxide. If I read out the names, it's either acid or it's hydroxide. It's very simple to understand that when it's called acid, it's acidic in nature. When it's an hydroxide, it must be basic in nature. And according to that, you can see here red litmus, blue phenolphthalein, which is again another indicator, and methyl orange, which is also a common indicator. They have evident color changes. I'm not reading out this chart, but you can use it as a reference whenever you answer questions related to color change in chemistry. Now moving ahead, let's start with today's new content. That's 2.1.2. How do acids and bases react with metals? This is a very interesting and common question that is repeatedly asked whenever we discuss acids. How they react with metals. Now, before looking into how they react, let us first see the experimental setup. You can see here there is a test tube, and in this test tube, it has been sealed with a cork which contains one opening through which a bent delivery tube has been attached. The bent delivery tube is connected to a beaker which contains soapy solution. Now, let's look at the reactants. You have dilute sulfuric acid and zinc granules, that is, small particles of zinc. In your textbook, already it is written that there is evolution of hydrogen gas. But in the chemistry lab, when you will be performing this experiment, you won't actually come to know what the gas is. Therefore, there are some analytical tests for each and every gas which identifies which gas that is. So when this gas, whichever is produced here, comes through this bent delivery tube, the soap solution immediately starts forming bubbles. And when these bubbles, which are very light in weight, goes up and you bring a burning splint or a candle, the gas will immediately burn with a pop sound. Pop sound is a test for identifying hydrogen. Therefore, we are clear that hydrogen gas is formed. So if we may sum up, we find that an acid and a metal has reacted to form hydrogen gas for sure. And what is it that it has produced? It has produced zinc sulfate. Zinc plus sulfuric acid produces zinc sulfate and hydrogen. Now this zinc sulfate is actually a salt. Therefore, acids and metals produce salt and hydrogen gas. Remember it. Similar example has been cited over here, which is of a base. Sodium hydroxide is a base. As you can see, OH is there. So if the aqueous solution of sodium hydroxide reacts with metallic zinc, which is a solid, it produces hydrogen gas and sodium zincate. Sodium zincate is a salt. So here in this case, a base reacts with a metal to form salt and hydrogen. Therefore, we can summarize that acid plus metal forms salt and hydrogen. Also, base plus metal forms salt plus hydrogen. Now, moving to the next 2.1.3, how do metal carbonates and metal bicarbonates, that is hydrogen carbonate, react with acids? Now, let us look at this experimental setup. It is a simple setup which consists of a test tube A, and this test tube has a cork attached to it with two openings. Through one opening, a thistle funnel has been inserted while through the other opening, the bent delivery tube has been connected. This bent delivery tube is inserted into the mouth of another small beaker which contains calcium hydroxide solution. Now let's look at the reactants. So you have here dilute hydrochloric acid which reacts with sodium carbonate. Here we are studying metal carbonate and acid. Now what does it form? Look at these equations. Test tube A has sodium carbonate and hydrogen chloride, that is hydrochloric acid. It forms sodium chloride, water and carbon dioxide. Now again the same question, how will you identify a colorless gas? So for that you can perform this simple experiment. You can see here the calcium hydroxide solution has been used. So I am showing this to you in details. When this gas which is produced in this experiment enters the test tube containing calcium hydroxide, it gradually starts forming a milky solution. This milky solution is formed by the production of calcium carbonate. Therefore, you can easily say that the gas that is formed in this experiment is carbon dioxide. So this lime water test is an analytical test to identify carbon dioxide gas. So this is the equation which will help you understand why this turns white. Moving ahead, let's look at activity 2.6. In this activity, you have taken 2 milliliter of sodium hydroxide solution in a test tube and you have added 2 drops of phenolphthalein solution. What do you observe? When you add this phenolphthalein solution, see immediately the solution of sodium hydroxide turns pinkish in color. So this answers your first question, what is the color of the solution? Initially it was colorless, now it has become pink or magenta, whatever you say. Now add dilute sulfuric acid drop by drop. Is there any color change in the mixture? Yes, there will be a color change in the mixture because sodium hydroxide is a base. When you add drop by drop solution of hydrochloric acid, there will be neutralization reaction in that which will make the solution colorless once again. This phenolphthalein here has been used as an indicator to test the neutralization reaction. Now coming up next is a reaction between one acid and a base, that is sodium hydroxide and dilute hydrochloric acid. You have mixed them and then what is the result? When you take a few drops of this solution and heat it, you can see after a while there is formation of salt. Therefore, we can say that acids when react with base forms salt and water. Now look at these equations. Sodium hydroxide plus hydrochloric acid, both in aqueous solution state, forms sodium chloride, which is common salt, and water. This NaCl is aqueous because there is water which is also formed in this solution, and this sodium chloride remains in the form of a solution. Therefore, we can say acids plus base forms salt and water. Now coming to activity 2.7, here we want to see the color change that happens when acids react with metal oxide. So you have taken copper oxide, small amount in a beaker, and add to it dilute hydrochloric acid. There is a change in the color because a salt called copper chloride is formed. When metal oxide reacts with acid, they form salt and water. Now there is this question, why should curd and sour substances not be kept in brass and copper vessels? Curd is formed when there is lactic acid fermentation in milk. So when I say lactic acid, that means it is acidic in nature. And if you are planning to store that same curd in copper and brass, it is very likely that these metals will react with the acid and there may be a chance of food poisoning. Many such cases have been observed over the period of time, and therefore, ideally, you will see that curd is prepared generally in the mud or the glass vessels and also stored in either glass vessel or steel vessels or even mud vessels. Now, moving ahead, let us look at activity 2.8. What do all acids and bases have in common? Now, there are some suggestions of substances or reactants in activity 2.8. Now, this glucose, alcohol, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, they are not all similar substances. Some are acid, some are alcohol, some are carbohydrate solutions. Now, the question is they want to see whether these substances are capable of allowing electricity to pass through it. And if you want to identify that, you have to have a circuit connection done as shown in figure 2.3. So there should be a battery attached to it. The setup for the passage of electricity has to be done, and then only you will be able to observe if the light bulb glows, that means electricity is passing. So the solution, that is the electrolyte which we say, is a good conductor of electricity, and if the light bulb does not glow, that means it is a bad conductor of electricity or maybe even an insulator. Now let us look at these results when the experiment was performed. Acid solution, that is dilute acid solution, taken, and we see that light bulb glows. That means acid solution in water conducts electricity. Now we have taken dilute hydrochloric acid or dilute sulfuric acid. They will allow the light bulb to glow, proving that they are good conductors of electricity. Now when you take sugar, sugar does not allow the bulb to glow, therefore, it is not a conductor of electricity. In case of sulfuric acid, you can see electricity can flow through the solution. So, we can conclude that acids or acidic substances do allow light rays to pass through them. Now, the question is why, and why not for other substances? The reason is acid contains H plus ions, that is the hydrogen ions as cations, and anions such as the chloride ion in hydrochloric acid, the nitrate ion in nitric acid, the sulfate ion in sulfuric acid, so on. Since this cations present in the acid has H plus, this suggests acids produce hydrogen ion in a solution, and this is actually responsible for the acidic property. Therefore, through this experiment, you have learned two things. First, acids allow electricity to pass through it. Second, the H plus ion leads to the acidic property of some substances. Now, moving ahead, we have activity 2.9. In this activity, there is an experiment that is being performed. And this experiment, which is given in the diagram, you can see sodium chloride, that is common salt, is added to sulfuric acid. It leads to the formation of sodium sulfate and HCl. More or less, all the reactants and the products are in the aqueous stage. Now let us look at the questions that are given inside the box in the activity 2.9. First is, what do you observe? Is there a gas coming out of the delivery tube or wherever you are performing that experiment? Yes, there is a gas that is coming out, and this gas, as you can see from that experiment, it is HCl. Now there is something tricky that is given over here. How will you identify what is the chemical nature of the gas? So, when this gas immediately comes out through the bent delivery tube, it turns a blue litmus red, therefore showing its acidic properties. So, we can say that the HCl gas that is produced as a result of the reaction of sodium chloride and sulfuric acid is acidic in nature. Now, there is a twist to this experiment. You have allowed this HCl gas to pass through a tube which contains calcium chloride granules. What will happen to that HCl gas? Calcium chloride is a dehydrating agent. It will absorb the water molecules from the HCl gas and make it completely dry. Therefore, we will not be able to see the color change of the blue litmus to red, proving that dry HCl is not acidic in nature. So, the objective of performing this experiment is to differentiate between the same gas in two forms. Moist HCl is acidic in nature, dry HCl is not acidic in nature. Therefore, the acidic nature of HCl is enhanced It is because of the H plus ions that are present along with water. Now let's look at the laboratory preparation of hydrogen chloride gas, though it is not a part of your textbook, but I would like to highlight here the existence of concentrated sulfuric acid. We have discussed the importance of calcium chloride. It is a dehydrating agent. Similarly, concentrated sulfuric acid is also a dehydrating agent. So in this experiment, when this hydrogen chloride gas is collected, it is completely dry. Therefore, it will not turn a blue litmus red. Let's read what is given in the book. This experiment suggests that hydrogen ions in hydrogen chloride are produced. HCl plus H2 forms H3O, that is hydronium ion, and Cl minus, that is chloride ion. Now H plus H2O forms H3O, that is the hydronium ions. We have seen the acids give H3O plus or H plus ions in water. I mentioned this just now. Therefore, the color change happens in case of an acidic solution. Now, if you take the case of bases, that is potassium hydroxide and magnesium hydroxide, in presence of water, they break down to form a K plus OH minus ion. Note the difference. When an acid reacts with water, it produces H plus or H3O plus hydrogen or hydronium ion, while in case of a base, it produces hydroxyl ion. You need to remember this. Now look at this simple but interesting question. Question is, all bases do not dissolve in water. That's true. But there are some bases that dissolve in water. And these special bases are called as alkalis. Now there is a special warning for you all. Never taste or touch them as they may cause harm. Now let's look at the reaction of acids and bases. Just now we have discussed that an acid plus a base forms salt and water. We have seen that experiment also. Now when we say salt and water, what is a salt? A salt is a compound which is formed by the neutralization reaction between an acid and a base. They ionize in water to produce two substances, cations and anions, which either exist as hydrated ions in aqueous solution or mixed with water to generate acids and bases. Now, salts can be of three categories based on the pH value. They are neutral salts, which has a pH value exactly 7, maybe acidic, which has a pH value of less than 7, and basic salts, which have a pH value of more than 7. Now, let's look at this activity 2.1. Here, they have suggested to take 10 milliliter of water in a beaker and add a few drops of concentrated sulfuric acid and then swirl the beaker slowly. Questions to this experiment are, is there a change in temperature? But before that, let us see what actually happens. Look at the first picture. When a few drops of acid are added to water, there is an immediate explosion, or at least there is a sudden change in temperature. You can see these are the simulation photographs which show that it has exploded and the particles of the solution have spread around the test tube. So this reaction, which allows the formation of a large amount of heat and even may lead to explosion, is called exothermic reaction. I have already discussed neutralization, exothermic, endothermic reaction in my previous module videos of chapter 1. You may visit them to understand it in details. Now moving ahead, what do we understand by the strength of acids and bases? When we say strength of acid and bases, we measure it in the pH scale, which is also known as potens, P-O-T-E-N-Z in the German language. And this pH scale has a value of 0 to 14, the middle of which is 7. 7 is considered neutral. The more you go towards 0 from 7, the acidic nature increases, and the more you go towards 14 from 7, the basic nature increases. That means there is increase in hydrogen ion concentration towards 0 and there is decrease in hydrogen ion concentration as you move towards 14. Now, this is the general pH scale in which you can see the different substances which we use for our household purpose has been graded as acidic, neutral, and basis. The water that we drink is more or less neutral. Distilled water is completely neutral. Moving ahead, here table 2.2 asks you a lot of questions related to the solutions that are given and the color of the pH paper. That means they are asking you to identify whether these substances are acidic, basic, or neutral. And this is the result of the experiments that have been performed with the pH paper. You can go through it and understand the substances mentioned here are acids, bases, or neutral. Now, there is a great importance of pH in our everyday life. Are plants and animals pH sensitive? Exactly, they are. Our body works within a range of 7 to 7.8, and living organisms can survive only a very small range of pH change. Therefore, when there is contamination in the rainwater through the pollutants that are present in the atmosphere, and there is formation of acids like carbonic acid, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, it adds with the water and comes down along with the rain. It is called as acid rain. And when these acid rain mixes with the normal water or falls on the grasses and plants, they immediately cause a risk to the survival of those organisms. They can even lead to death of aquatic life and corrode terrestrial plants and animals. Now, coming to the next, what is the pH of the soil in your backyard? Plants require a specific range of pH. If the soil is too acidic, they will not be able to grow. Therefore, if somebody has a plan for a large scale production, then the person has to first identify the type of soil through the pH check and then decide whether the soil is suitable for the growth of that particular plant or not. But definitely, there are ways and means by which the pH can be controlled. Now, what about the digestive system? You must be aware that in our stomach there is repository of dilute hydrochloric acid. These dilute hydrochloric acid actually helps in the process of digestion, especially the proteins, but they do not harm our stomach. But then at the same time, if the stomach is without food for a long time, this hydrochloric acid starts corroding the walls of the stomach. Definitely, it doesn't happen overnight, but if anybody has a tendency of starving for long hours, with the passage of time and age, there are high chances of people undergoing stomach ulcers. Or you feel acidic, you can immediately take milk of magnesia, or maybe you take antacids, which are available in the market. That will lead to the formation of a neutralization reaction and reduce the acidic nature inside the stomach. Now, coming to tooth decay, this is definitely a cause of concern. Tooth decay starts when the pH of your mouth is lower than 5.5. And why does this happen? This happens because the food particles that get stuck between our teeth, there is bacterial decomposition of the food, which leads to the formation of more and more acid. So it's always advisable to brush your teeth before you sleep. Now, this is something very interesting. Some of the animals, when they bite us, for example, the ant or the honeybees, it immediately gives us an irritation. The sting of the honeybees actually contain an acid in a very mild form, which is called as formic acid. And this formic acid causes that irritation and even at times swelling whenever there is a bite by ants or even by honeybees. To immediately cure it, you can use a baking soda solution at the region where it has been stung, and with the passage of time, the pain will gradually reduce. That's all for today's module video. Like, share, and subscribe to Shudeepa tutorial. Coming up next is the last part of the topic, that is 2.4, more about salts. Till then, thanks for watching.